Okay, here today with Rod Jessen from our Queensland office. How are you, Rod?
Hey, Drew. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, welcome, mate, and thanks for coming in. You've been selling businesses for a long time. You've got experience in a number of sectors. I want to talk to you specifically today, though, about how to sell an asphalt or road construction business. It's a bit of a niche. I know you've done a few of those. Something you're happy to talk about this morning, Rod?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, it's all about, depending on how big they are, is the contracts they've got, state of the equipment. The big players roll over their equipment, Drew, every 3 to 4 years because they're getting pretty well hammered. They're out in the sun and they're all asphalt, everything's all heat related. The mid-sized players will try and keep their equipment for 10 years. But obviously once you get to about 5 years, when the equipment side of it, then it's starting to get aged. So once buyers come through, and depends on how much the usage as well. You know, they depend on how many gangs they've had. That, you know, if the machines are working every night, well, obviously 5 years is probably going to be that. So it's going to devalue the business. And with that, it's really about, like every business, it's sort of return on investment. So with those, if they've got state and federal and council contracts, depending on how consistency and what they're on about, as in the length of them and the history of the business as well. So the bigger players, there's 4 main players in the asphalt that build the highways and the main roads and everything. And then there's the next tier down that build suburban streets, and then there's the next tier down that would deal with councils, etc. And then there's more the private guys that are dealing with developers that may do big car parks for Bunnings, new developments, shopping centres, etc. And then there's the next one down, which is more the mum and dads that are doing driveways, etc.
I'm glad you mentioned equipment. It's one of those industries. Sometimes, as you know, in selling businesses, we simply add back the depreciation. It's not a real expense. Sometimes something populated by an accountant, but in this particular scenario, depreciation is pretty real. That equipment does depreciate over time. It's a real expense to the business, perhaps not necessarily an add back.
No, correct. Again, depends if they've got council. Been looking at a lot of them. I've been doing lately, and same with the civil. The equipment we've been looking at the market value, because the equipment, even after 5 years, has been potentially written off, but it still may have a value. For a pay that may have a value still of 120,000. They're quite expensive equipment, so it may have a value of 120 if you took it to market at pickle sort of stuff. So we've been looking at obviously the written down value if we're doing a share sale, but then looking at the actual market value. A lot of people always come back to me and go, Rod, have you had this equipment appraised? And I normally always recommend not to, because it could be 2 months down the track, and with COVID just passed, and then getting equipment in, once upon a time it would take 2 years for COVID to get some new equipment in, because most of it's all overseas, European companies, Italian, etc., German companies that make all this equipment. So a little bit now it's downturned. So if you took a piece of equipment that was worth $500,000 market share a year ago, through the end of COVID, you probably could have got 200,000 for it. Now it's coming back to that 120. So we just wait till we have a buyer, and then we'll get, if they need to do that from financing, then we'll get it valued.
How are you finding, like, if someone looking to sell one, it's not important, I guess, if they don't have their own plan. It would only be the larger companies, I'm assuming, would have their own plan. Yeah,
correct. There's one independent in Australia that owns their own asphalt plant that physically makes it, and then there's the 4 big players, Boral, Colas, Downer, and can't think of the last one now. I've got his phone in my directory. But yeah, there's 4 main players and then one independent out of Newcastle. He owns about 6 around the country.
Okay.
They're pretty expensive. Yeah, they're 10 to 30 million to set up.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to be pouring out some asphalt to get that money back.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And how are you finding in general the demand, buyer demand?
Yeah, there's always plenty of interest in it. Again, it's like every business, Drew. If it stacks up, buyers there. But in general, there's always people that have either been or found, like we're taking something to market where, say, it's a level of, say, $2 million and the assets worth 1 million, written down assets. Yeah, there's still plenty of people in that. Finding people that have worked for Downer or an ex-operations manager that sort of wants to cut their teeth, and they can borrow that $1 million against the equipment.
Yeah.
And obviously then they need to fund and do a business loan for probably for 50% against the other $1 million.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing from there is the trading cash, because a lot of those jobs, they have to put assurities down on their contracts. So they could have anything from 200,000. Like if they got $1 million worth of contracts, they could have 20% of that put up front for assurities on that particular contract. So that's where it sort of niggles at them a little bit.
I'm assuming then work in progress would be another calculation you'd have to make on the settlement. They'll be halfway through numbers of jobs. Yeah, absolutely. If there was something, again, that mid-range $2 million, their jobs, their holy grail jobs are anything from 100,000 to $500,000. So I think if there was a $500,000 one, they would probably wait until that was finished, I think, to chime it in, because those guys are only turning over 6 to 10 million. So that's probably 1 month's work sort of stuff, if that makes sense. Cool. Awesome, Rod. Look, I know we could talk about Asphalt all day. You're a busy man. But I appreciate you coming up with a chat today. If anyone is interested in selling an asphalt or a construction type of business, I'm sure you'd be happy to chat to them, Rod. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. Yep. Plenty of experience in it now. I'm more than happy to help people and just have a chat to them for sure, Drew. Yeah, so your details, Rod, you can find Rod's details on the morganbusinesssales.com website. Happy to chat. Thanks again, Rod, for coming in today. We look forward to chatting to you again. Thanks, Drew.